Hey, you're listening to Deviatus, the podcast produced every 2 weeks about the paranormal and the unexplained. My name is Jeremy, and you can follow the show at deviatus.com. Or if you're into social media, you can find the show on Facebook, or you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at DeviatusPod. This is episode number 4. Today I've invited Loren Christensen to talk about his book, Cops' True Stories of the Paranormal, Ghosts, UFOs, and Other Shivers. We get into some really compelling discussion about anything from the Shanghai tunnels to ghost encounters to UFO sightings, all of which have been reported by law enforcement officials. This is another one of those episodes where the audio is not quite up to par where I'd like it to be because it was a phone conversation, but again, this is really compelling stuff and I think you'll enjoy it. So let's jump right to the conversation.
All right, well, we have Loren Christensen here with us today. Loren, thank you for joining us on Deviatus.
Thanks, Jeremy. Glad to be here.
Loren, you have quite an extensive background. Can you tell us more about your military and law enforcement experience?
Well, putting them all together, I have about 30 years in law enforcement. And I started as a military policeman in the Army way back in the late 60s during the Vietnam era. And I served 2 years as a military policeman stateside. And then 1 year as a military policeman in Vietnam, in Saigon, which at that time was considered the most dangerous city in the world, which I can certainly agree to. I got out in 1970. I didn't want anything to do with law enforcement. One of my sparring partners in the martial arts was a Portland police officer and talked me into taking the test. And I took the test, and there was a year wait to get hired, and so I took a job grabbing shoplifters at a department store and got beat up every week by old ladies with their shopping bags, and then was eventually hired in 72 and did 25 years with the Portland Police and in Oregon, and worked street patrol, street gangs for about 4 years, and my specialty was white supremacist gangs and white supremacist crimes. Did a lot of bodyguarding because of my martial arts background, and did a lot of media stuff. So that's basically it, about 30 years altogether.
Wow, that's quite a bit. You know, my dad's retired Army, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you're welcome.
Now, you've written over 50 books. A lot of them have traditionally been about law enforcement, and you even got some fiction in there. But you kind of took a turn with this new book. What inspired you to change directions and write a bit about paranormal experiences of law enforcement personnel?
Well, I've always been interested in the paranormal, like most people are, at least those who believe there's something to it or have had experiences. About, 6 years ago or so, I was talking to my book agent, and he asked if I would be interested in doing a book on the Ghost Hunters, the TV show. And I go, yeah. And I said, okay, I'll see what I can do. So that deal eventually fell through, or it didn't happen for whatever reason. But in the interim, my wife and I said we got to gain some experience here. So we got the EVP devices and digital cameras and all that, and kind of went about it on our own for about 6 months, just exploring graveyards and mausoleums and some old houses. We didn't know what we were doing. We were totally amateur. And we had a couple of experiences doing that. And then when the book deal fell through, we stopped doing that for a while. And then I started thinking about a couple of my experiences here about a little over a year ago, and wondered if other officers had experience. So that's how I got into it. I'm going to see what I can do and talk to officers and get their stories.
So have you had experiences prior to, the ghost hunting that you and your wife did?
Prior to it, yeah, I did. I had a couple experiences on the police job, which I relate in Cops' True Stories of the Paranormal, and one story in the Army. And before I went to Vietnam, I was stationed in the Florida Everglades, right on the edge of the Florida Everglades, and I was at a missile base. And as a military policeman, I walked a German Shepherd, a sentry dog, around the base at night. And we had experiences with UFOs, which in the book I call Close Encounters of the Second Kind, meaning that We had really close encounters that affected people and our animals and the entire cacophony of sounds in the jungle, which came to a total stop when UFOs went over. And so I talk about that in the book. So I had those experiences, and I thought, well, there's that, I could tell that story and a couple of things that happened to me on the police department. And so then I went about looking for officers to tell their stories.
Now, would you consider that to be different from the experiences you had when you were taking up in paranormal investigation after you left the force?
Well, they were paranormal in nature. They were beyond what is normal, and my experiences on the police department. I just had a couple. I write a lot about dead bodies in the book, and officers' experiences with dead bodies, and I had a lot of dead bodies called. In fact, they called me the death car for a while because I was getting one or two a week on the particular district that I worked. And when I was thinking back on it, I just wonder if I had experiences that I was not savvy enough to pick up on. I think that's the case with a lot of people. They're not realizing what is going on. They're not receptive to the experience they're having, or they just blow it off. So I may have had some experiences there, but experiences for sure were. We have a thing here in Portland, Oregon, that's called the Shanghai tunnels, and these were tunnels that were in the old Skid Row, which is now Old Town, that led from underneath old bars in the late 1800s and up to like 1920 or so, that led from underneath these bars out to the seawall, where there were Shanghai drunken people, guys, and the guys would wake up out in the middle of the ocean on a ship, and now you're a ship employee, And some of those tunnels are considered quite haunted. My partner and I had an experience on a call, in which there was no other explanation that happened right above one of these tunnels. It used to be Skid Row, a rock. In fact, I wrote a book called Skid Row on the place, and it was just a rocket and rolling dive after violent bars and shootings and knifings and fights all the time. It was the closest thing to Saigon that I experienced on the Portland Police Bureau. But I got there right at the tail end of it, and then it was slowly graduating. It's still turning into kind of a yuppie place, with these quaint little restaurants and nook cafes and that sort of thing where people can eat and chit chat, as compared to the old days where it was just fighting and knifing and shooting. So we took a call at a cafe, which is a small cafe, 4 or 5 tables and a kind of like a coffee bar. I don't know what you call it. A little coffee bar. You just kind of stand up and drink at this little high table that looks out over the window. Only one entrance, and because the area is still pretty rough, the windows are barred heavily. The door is a double door, multiple locks, and then there's a iron door that closes over the regular door. We got a call on a break-in. My partner and I got there, and the owner was waiting for us outside, hugging his elbows and just really trembling. And we said, "What's going on?" And I'm making the story very short, but he took us inside, and we looked at the door. The door had not been tried. There's no way they'd have to gotten by the iron door first. And there's no way. And there's only one door into the place. So we got into the place, and there was a formation on the floor of coffee cups, about 12 square on the bottom, and then 10, and then 8, and whatever. They formed a pyramid. And I kind of looked at it, and I go, "That's a strange place to put coffee cups." And the guy pointed at it, and I said, "What?" And he says, "I didn't put those there." So I worked until 9:30 last night. I locked up. I went home. I came in this morning at 7:30. This was about 8 o'clock when we got the call, 8 a.m. He says, "I didn't put them there." And so we asked him the standard police questions, and then at one point he pointed at the coffee maker, and there's a pot of coffee boiling. He said, "I didn't make the coffee." He said, I usually make that about 9:30 before I open at 10, so the coffee's fresh for people. I didn't make that this morning. So we took the call, and we later, when we were writing it up, we said, we cannot write this, that is some kind of paranormal thing. We'll just write it as a burglary of a business, with no suspect information and no point of entry, because there was no point of entry. No place for anybody to hide inside, let alone they would not be able to get out of the place. So that was one situation, we had there that I had, that was beyond the normal, no other explanation. And I took literally thousands of burglary reports when I was working the street, and nothing even close to that. And the fact
you didn't find any sort of signs of theft or nothing missing or anything like that?
No, nothing missing. The Shanghai tunnels because it's still there, is about 3 doors down. In fact, while we were there, someone had just put out a sandwich board tour today at 2:00 or something like that. And just coincidentally, I was just finishing the book, and at lunch break I switched on the History Channel, and one of those ghost programs. The guy always wears the black T-shirt, kind of buff guy. And
Zach Bagans?
I think so, yeah. He's always challenging ghosts to a fight and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he was touring the place. And they were doing a show from the tunnels, and they got some electronic voice sounds. And in fact, there was the tunnels were used to transport goods from the ships to the various shops. It was also used to transport these knocked out street guys out to the ships. But there were also places along the tunnel where they conducted prostitution. And they got one EVP of a woman saying, "Let's get naked."
Wow.
So,
I think I remember that episode of Ghost Adventures. Now that you say
I think
that.
it was a repeat. I want to say 2012 or something, but it was a repeat. And I go, wow, I just finished the story, and that's kind of weird. But yeah,
wow,
and that and a couple other incidents, and that's what. And the UFO thing is what, kind of sparked the idea and maybe start looking into doing a book.
Now, how did you go about selecting the stories that ultimately made it into the book?
At first I emailed a couple, 3 police friends, and I said, what do you think of the idea? And one guy, who actually has a story called Mannequin. I think it's called Mannequin. Or The Mannequin. An experience he had, in a storeroom. He's a campus cop, or was a campus cop, with a mannequin. Very strange story. If you read that story, I have the video of that, but he does not want me to show that to anybody. So, anyway, he said, you can't do that book. He said, you're well known in what's called the warrior community. And one of my co-authors and I have a book called On Combat that's been a bestseller for about 13 years. And he said, you'll ruin your reputation. And I said, oh, okay, I don't know. I don't care about my reputation. And so I went and I asked a couple, 3 other guys, some retired detectives, and they go, yeah, do it. And I said, I have a story. So I went into Facebook, and I belong to 3 or 4 law enforcement pages on Facebook, and I just put a feeler out there that I'm looking for, stories on the paranormal and ghosts, UFOs, spirits, whatever. And I thought I'd be mocked and ran out of town. And I think I only caught a couple little, snide comments, but the rest of the people were overwhelmingly enthused about it. In fact, the very first day I got a story, it's a hospital story. It's called Hates. It's about ghosts called Mary in Texas. From a international police trainer, the very first day, he'd already written it up, and he didn't know what he was going to do with it yet, so he gave it to me to use. So, and then it was just a matter of collecting stories, and every once in a while, things only last for a day or two on Facebook, and other things replace it. So I go back to the sites over a period of about 6 weeks and did my big story entry into Facebook, and I just continued to get stories until I got enough for for the book. I didn't want a huge volume. I wanted a nice, couple hundred pages, 180 pages of short stories. I limited them to 4 pages, and the only person who violated that was me on the UFO story because I couldn't contain it in 4 pages. But they would send me the story. They'd write it up in their own words. Excuse me. I would edit it and form it into the format that I wanted for the book, and then send it back to them to change anything, to say, no, that's not right. This happened too. I just remember that sort of thing. And then once we, usually just a couple things swapped back and forth, and then the story was good to go.
Okay. Well, one of the stories, which one did you find to be most compelling out of the stories that you hadn't personally experienced yourself?
I guess the thing that really caught my eye, caught my interest, a couple things. One was people disappearing. And I'm not talking about runaways or a guy goes out to get a pack of cigarettes and doesn't come back home, that kind of disappearing, but disappearing right in front of the officers. And I think I have 3 or 4 stories. At the end of each section, I have 4 sections in the book. At the end of each section, I complete the section with 5 or 6 stories from the news, from legitimate news sources about stories that relate to that particular section. So counting one of those, I think I have 4 or 5 stories of incidents where officers were talking to someone or chasing someone, and they just simply disappeared in front of them. In fact, I lead the book because it's such a good story with a story where 2 officers in Virginia were working undercover in an old van cruising a neighborhood that had been getting hit hard with home burglaries. They saw an old beater car that looked really suspicious to them, so they started to follow the car. The guy did the typical look in the rear mirror, look straight ahead, back to the mirror, straight ahead, that nervous kind of thing that always alerts cops, and then he just took off. So there ended up being a big chase with this old beater van chasing this old beater car. Yeah, and they at one point they really moved. They're doing like 70 or 80 miles an hour, and they enter an area in which there's this large tunnel. I looked it up. He didn't tell me, writers didn't tell me, but I had to look it up, and it's a tunnel in a railroad yard that's all cement, like a large circle of cement. The outer edge on each end is a large cement ring, and I think it's used for trains. I may be wrong about that, but it wasn't clear by the picture. But anyway, the car just nailed the edge of that tunnel and hit so hard it went up in the air, fell back down, and the officers in the van got their van under control and stopped behind it. Just as the driver was crawling out of the window, shimmied himself out of the window and took off at a full run into the tunnel. The officers in fast pursuit behind him, and they ran for quite a while, and the officers were gaining on the guy, and they were just within arm's reach. The closest officer in the lead was just within arm's reach of the guy, and the guy disappeared. He was gone. And the officers came to a stop and go, what? And looked all around. And unlike some tunnels, driven through tunnels, sometimes you see a little door where maybe workmen could come out the door and that sort of thing. There's no doors. There's no, like walkways or ledges. It's just a circle of cement. And the officers were flashing the lights. It was at nighttime. They were flashing the lights all over the place. And totally bewildered, they walked back out of the tunnel over to the crashed car. And there was a guy sitting behind the wheel with the steering wheel impaled into his chest, dead. Sergeant got there. The sergeant got there, and they told the sergeant what the deal was. He says, "You can't put that in your report. Just write it up as a pursuit, and the guy died on impact. You don't put that in your report." And that was, I think it was like, if I remember right, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and both officers are retired now. And they both see each other from time to time. One is a very religious guy, and the officer who wrote up the story for me, I sent it, and I edited it in the book for him. He showed that to his partner. His partner said, "That's good." He said, "It's really good." And so they were happy with that. And So it's pretty spooky. And there's others that are similar to that. Some where there wasn't a foot pursuit, but rather than the officer was just talking to a couple in one case outside the window on a rainy night, and then they were gone. A guy pulls over behind, an officer pulls over up by the Great Lakes, pulls up behind a guy wearing an old-fashioned suit like from the 40s and a blanket around his neck, no hat. It's snowing like crazy. And the officer pulls it behind him and stops so that the guy is on his right front fender. He's right at the headlight there. It's daytime, not nighttime, daytime. And the officer picks up the radio mic to tell him I'm out checking a guy, looks back up, the guy's gone. And he gets out, thinks the guy fell, slipped in the snow, went around the side of the car. Guy's not there, no footprints, nothing. Called for another police car. They came, they looked all around. And ended up, the officer caught a lot of flack about that, chasing the guy who wasn't there. And then another officer, an old veteran, came up to him and he says, that street, that highway is notorious. And a lot of the old veteran officers won't go on that highway unless they have a call there. And it's notorious for, back in the 40s and 50s, back when Vegas was the big, crime capital mafia thing of the world, they would take guys up there and kill them, or they'd kill them in Vegas and then take them up there, roll them up in a blanket and roll them over the embankment.
Mm.
And
wow.
A couple other officers from that same agency had told this. The officer told me the story. They told him of incidents that they had of sightings of. Are these spirits or are these ghosts? The difference between ghosts are possibly some kind of residual energy that just is burned into the atmosphere or whatever. And in one of those, that same road, the officer was writing a report. He looked up and there's a guy going by in a horse-drawn carriage. And by the time he chucked his paperwork to the side and pulled out to go after and see what he was doing, the guy was gone. And as well as the horse and the carriage, and which has led to why these officers really don't like to go on that road unless they absolutely have to go there because of a call or something.
Well, your stories are reminding me of a couple different types I've heard of, and some of those are ghosts or apparitions, and some have to do with the theory about time travel and certain locations in the country where that kind of thing occurs. But you did mention something that I kind of want to go back to regarding the police reports. What kind of risk would someone take in law enforcement by actually putting something like this on a police report? You said the sergeant had encouraged the officer not to, but what happens when officers do put this on a report?
And likewise with the burglary we took near the Shanghai tunnels, and we just decided not to write it that way. That what the owner clearly felt was going on, and what we felt, just the dynamics of the energy in the place, what we were feeling. It would be kind of a career suicide. A report like that probably wouldn't go anywhere anyway. It'd probably just end up in the bottom of the pile or deep into the computer system. But if other officers heard about it, I think you'd be up to criticism. And I was thinking that if I was at roll call in the morning, and there's 20 guys in the roll call sitting around getting information from the sergeant, and I said, yesterday I had a run-in with a ghost. The cat calls would be overwhelming, and spitballs and, all of that sort of thing. And, it'd be laughed and mocked and punched and everything. And then we go out to the cars to get in the car. There would be one officer, maybe two officers would come up who didn't say anything in the roll call room and said, I've had similar situations. Some of the comments on Facebook pages regarding this book from officers is, I've had similar experiences, or I was really happy to read this book because now I know others have had the same experience. But they're afraid to say anything. They're concerned to say something that they're going to be that guy, that weird guy, talks about ghosts and spirits. Cops pretty much are are black and white guys. They're it's probably not the best term right now, given the political climate, but they're meat and potatoes guys. It's like they say in CSI. It's all about the evidence, and when you have something that's beyond normal, it's pretty hard for other people who have not had the experience to accept that, and that's true outside the police world as well.
I think you touched on it right there. You hit the nail on the head when you say people are a little reluctant to come forward with these things, but once you do, I think that does create a level of validation for other people. And what kind of response have you received now that your book's out? Have you had any sort of feedback from people in your life or career that have maybe read the book? And what's been the general feedback?
Well, reviews-wise, it's been great. The book has been out about 3 months. I can't remember the exact date it came out. I think it came out early March. A week after it came out, it was number one, and since then it's fluctuated. I just now checked, and it's ranked number 2 on Amazon. It's number 2 in ghosts and hauntings, number 2 in the supernatural section, and number 4 in the religious spirituality supernatural section. It's bounced back and forth between 1 and 2 for that whole time. It sells like crazy. It really took me by surprise. I didn't expect that at all. It was just a fun book. I like to write about subcultures, written on prostitution and street gangs and Skid Row I mentioned, and that sort of thing. And this is sort of a subculture, a little bit stretched of the definition of subculture, but sort of a subculture. So I didn't expect it to do that terribly well, but I was really just overwhelmed by how well it is selling. The comments I get, like I said, are from people who are not in law enforcement. They just really liked the book and have commented that they said this book really gave me nightmares. And that wasn't my intention. I was writing it up. I tried writing it up as well as I could. There's no exaggeration in any of the stories. It's all what the officers experienced. So I'm getting a lot of feedback from people who are not related to law enforcement in any way, saying that they really enjoy the book, and it kind of validates some of the experiences that they had, and they appreciate that it's coming from people who are trained observers and who are experienced in many aspects of life that people outside law enforcement just don't experience. Cops in, say, a big city see more in a month than most people experience in a lifetime as far as violence and emotions and just crazy, stressful tension and that sort of thing. So for them to come forward and talk about something that doesn't fit in the normal parameters of what they're, a shooting's a big deal. But if you go to a lot of shootings, pretty soon it becomes kind of a sameness. It doesn't mean it's a boring call, but there becomes a sameness to it. Likewise with a burglary, likewise with a bar fight. So, but it's different people, a little different situation, different venue, but there's still a sameness to it. It's these things that fall way out of that sameness, the things that are beyond normal for police officers. That's what we tried to capture in the book, and that's what I think some of the readers have appreciated. And then, like I said, the cops that have read it, I don't know who the readers are. I get comments, and then sometimes I get an email from somebody, I really like that book. And so then I know that they are a cop or they're not a cop. But as far as the high numbers go, I just don't know who the readers are. So the ones who have commented, the officers who have commented, say this is there are incidents in here that are very similar to my situations, but my experience.
Well, I certainly. Where can people go to find information about you and all of your works?
Well, all my stuff's on Amazon. I have a website from which we sell autographed copies of everything. A lot of people like autographed copies, so we can sell them there. And the website is www.lwcbooks.com. It's my initials, lwcbooks.com. That's for sign, but you can get them on Amazon. We can't sell ebooks on the website, and we're selling about 10 to 1 ebooks, Kindle books, to the paperback. So And I priced them really low. So I just wanted to get out there.
Well, thanks again so much. I'm planning on putting everything in my show notes that you mentioned, the link and maybe some links to your other books as well. It really has been a pleasure, and once again, thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Jeremy.
I want to take some time to thank Loren for showing up to the show today. You can find this episode's show notes on deviatus.com/Loren, Loren. Please feel free to keep this conversation going. You can do so by getting in touch with me on deviatus.com or on Facebook. Or if you'd like to chat with me on Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at DeviatusPod. Until next time, thanks for listening.